I'd give my all for her, by Tummy Hurts on AO3. Chapter 4. For Tony, the day his children were taken doesn't bring much of anything new. No revelations, no breakthroughs, just the same gnawing emptiness he's been carrying since Friday's voice crackled through his comms and shattered his world. It brings Pepper, though. After 15 hours on a flight, trapped in the knowledge that her kids are missing and utterly powerless to do anything about it, she arrives at the compound looking like she's barely holding on. Tony and May meet her on the tarmac as soon as the Stark Industries plane lands, their shadows stretching long and thin under the cold morning sun. Pepper collapses into Tony's arms the moment she steps off the plane, and it's a moment he knows he'll never forget. This isn't the Pepper Potts he knows, the one who is always composed, always calm in the storm, always the woman with an answer when the world decides to go to hell. This Pepper is undone. Her sobs ragged and breathless, her hands clenching at his shirt like it's the only thing keeping her grounded. Tony holds her tightly, his face buried in her hair as he murmurs reassurances he doesn't believe. Not yet. He can't. Morgan is, he forces himself to think. Her baby. The light of her life. Her shadow. Tony has always marveled at the connection between them, the way Morgan follows Pepper like a sunflower towards the sun. While Morgan is undeniably his kid, full of sass, wit, and too smart for her own good genius, she's also Pepper's little mini-me, from the tilt of her head when she's concentrating to the way her nose wrinkles when she's amused. There's science behind it, Tony knows it, a biological connection between mother and child, something chemical and instinctual that he can understand logically, but will never really truly feel. Of course, he has his own bond with Morgan, one that he wouldn't trade for anything in the world, but there's something about the bond between Pepper and Morgan that feels almost sacred. And then there's Peter. Tony tightens his hold on Pepper, his chest tightening at the thought of the boy who made their family what it is. Pepper loves Peter, not just because Tony brought him into their lives, not just because Peter is his own earnest, dorky, selfless way, warmed his way into the hearts of everyone he meets. No, Pepper's bond with Peter is different. He was the kid who made them want children of their own. Peter isn't Pepper's by blood, or even by time, but in every way that matters. He's her first child. The first kid she ever loved, not because he was exceptional, though he is, but because of the role he played in Tony's life. When Pepper looks at Peter, she doesn't just see a great kid. She sees the angel who dragged Tony Stark out of the depths of his own self-destruction. There was a time when Pepper had thought Tony was past the point of no return, when no amount of love or patience seemed to matter, when she was certain that he was going to drink himself into an early grave, and he probably would have, if it wasn't for Peter. Peter had been the light at the very end of a dark tunnel. Peter had been the light at the end of a very dark tunnel, the reason Tony finally saw himself as someone worth saving. In Peter, Pepper had found hope, not just for Tony, but for their future, for the possibility of a life beyond chaos and destruction. And now, that light was gone. Pepper pulls back slightly, her tear-streaked face looking up at him, and Tony's heart cracks all over again. He wants to tell her that they'll find the kids, that everything will be okay, but the words feel too fragile, too insubstantial to carry the weight of what they're facing. Instead, he presses a kiss to her forehead, a silent promise that he'll do whatever it takes to bring their family back together. It's not until the third day that they get something new. Tony had spent the second day, Pepper's first day back, flying tirelessly around the outskirts of the city. He scanned every back road, every wooded patch, every inch of terrain within a 100-mile radius, refusing to stop even as the ache in his body and the fog in his mind threatened to pull him under. The Avengers had divided themselves strategically, watching over the surrounding areas and keeping ears to the ground. Natasha had even called in a few favors from her shadowy network, while Rhodey kept a running log of every false lead and sighting. It wasn't enough. None of it was enough. And in the end, it isn't Tony or the Avengers who find something. It's Friday. The file pings through her system late in the afternoon, a heavily encrypted folder routed through a back door in her coding that Tony hadn't even realized existed. He makes a mental note to fix it later, if he gets through tonight without collapsing, but that thought is buried beneath the task at hand. The file is fragmented. broken beyond repair, and even Friday struggles to piece it together. But one image survives. The photo appears on his HUD, lingering on the screen. That's all it takes to gut him entirely. Peter. His boy's face is swollen, one eye shut completely, his lips split and puffy, streaked with red. He looks unconscious, slumped awkwardly in the back of what appears to be a vehicle. And Morgan. She's beside him, though only the back of her head is visible, her curls matted and tangled, her face is turned away, and Tony can't tell if she's breathing. It's a double-edged sword, her absence of injury. There's no visible confirmation she's alive. God, please let her be alive. But at least he doesn't have to see her hurt. If they've harmed her, he doesn't think he could bear it. Not when Peter's already in this state. Peter. Seeing him bruised and battered isn't new. It's an occupational hazard when your son is a teenage, crime-fighting vigilante. Tony has had to patch him up more times than he can count, clenching his teeth every time Peter tried to downplay an injury with that bright, boyish grin that made it impossible to stay mad at him. But this isn't some petty thief or misguided villain that Spider-Man had intercepted, leaving worse for wear and webbed to a queen's brownstone. This isn't part of the job. This is deliberate. This is personal. Someone took his son. Someone hurt him with intent, knowing exactly who he is, knowing what it would do to Tony Stark. Tony feels the bile rising in his throat before he even registers the weight of his helmet retracting. He stumbles, dropping to his knees in the grass along the deserted country road he'd been flying over, and empties the contents of his stomach onto the ground. He doesn't care how it looks, doesn't care that he's kneeling in the dirt, the Iron Man suit creaking as it folds awkwardly around him. All he can see is the image burned into his mind, Peter's battered face, Morgan's small, unmoving form beside him. Friday's voice cuts through the fog, cool and unflinching. "Boss, I've sent the image to Miss Potts and Miss Parker. It has been flagged as urgent." Tony clenches his jaw, his breath heaving as he forces himself to sit back on his heels. He's glad they have each other, Pepper and May, back at the compound, poring over legal documents and coordinating with detectives. He's glad they can lean on one another. He's glad he's alone, here on this desolate stretch of road, because no one should have to see him like this. He squeezes his eyes shut, his chest heaving as the edges of the world blur. They're still alive, he tells himself, forcing the mantra through his fractured thoughts. They're alive, and I'm going to bring them home. But as the image flashes again in his mind, clear and unrelenting, he knows that promise is growing harder to believe. "Boss, you have an incoming call from Miss Potts and Miss Parker. Would you like me to patch them through?" Friday's voice slices through the static in Tony's head, sharp and unavoidable. His helmet slides back into place, the HUD glowing faintly as the comm request blinks in the corner of his vision. Yeah, Tony says, his voice rough and unsteady. He clears his throat quickly. "Sure, just give me a second, Friday." He inhales deeply, the air catching in his throat for a moment before he lets it out in a controlled exhale. It doesn't steady the trembling in his fingers the way he hopes, but it's enough to pull his focus forward. He squares his shoulders, straightening in the suit as if he can lock away the cracks forming inside him. Tony blinks hard, pushing away the sheen in his eyes. He knows they've seen the picture, knows there's no hiding the truth from Pepper and May. They know him too well for that. Still, he feels the instinctive need to pull himself together, to be the one holding the pieces when everyone else feels like they're falling apart. When the call clicks through, Tony forces his voice to sound even. Not fine, because fine would insult them, but steady enough to carry the illusion of composure. "Hey," he says, careful, cautious. "You guys saw the picture, right?" There's a pause on the other end, silence stretching out like a rubber band pulled too tightly. Then Pepper speaks. "We saw it." Her voice is quiet, raw at the edges, but steady. There's something in it that Tony can't quite place, like she's keeping herself intact by sheer force of will. He doesn't respond right away, the lump in his throat making words impossible. May fills the gap, her voice louder but trembling, tumbling out too fast. What do you think it means?" she asks, each word a jagged breath. "Do you think Morgan's okay? She's not... We can't see her face in the picture, and Peter..." Her voice breaks, fracturing under the weight of unspoken fears. Tony's chest tightens, his mind replaying the image with cruel clarity. Peter's swollen face. Morgan's turned away for him. "They're alive," he says quickly, cutting through her spiral. The words come out harsher than he intends, a desperate edge sharpening his tone. "They're alive, May. They have to be." He hears her exhale shakily on the other end of the line, and Pepper speaks again, her voice a thread of calm woven into the frayed fabric of the moment. "Tony, what's the plan?" The question catches him off guard, and for a second his mind blanks. He's been so wrapped up in the shock of the image and holding himself together that he hasn't thought about the next step. "I'm working on it," he says, the words uneven as they tumble out. "The team's still out there. Friday's working on trying to salvage the files so we can track the IP. Tony." Pepper's voice interrupts, quiet but firm in a way that only she can manage. "You need to come back," she says. "We need to regroup. You've been out there for hours, and you can't do this alone. Let us help." He hesitates, his instincts screaming at him to keep moving, to keep searching. "I can't," he says finally, his voice breaking slightly. "I can't stop. Not now, not when—" "Tony," May interjects, her tone cutting through his resistance. "We're not asking you to stop. We're asking you to let us help. You're not the only one who loves those kids. You're not the only one who's—" She falters and presses forward. "Who's scared out of their mind right now." Her words aren't a blow, but a slow unraveling, peeling back his resolve to reveal the fragile mess beneath. "We'll figure it out," Pepper adds, softer but no less certain. "But you're no good to anyone if you burn yourself out. Come back, regroup, and we'll figure out the next step. Together." Tony exhales sharply, the sound somewhere between a sigh and a gasp, the words way heavier than they should. He knows they're right. Of course they're right. But stepping back feels like giving up. Still, he forces himself to nod, even though they can't see it. "Okay," he says finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm coming back." He ends the call before they can say anything else, the lingering hum of the line fading into silence. For a moment, he just stands there, his hands trembling as he resets his helmet. The picture burns in his mind, Peter's swollen face, Morgan's curls, and Tony clenches his fists. Regrouping does not go the way Tony hopes. In his perfect world, none of this would have happened in the first place. His kids would be at home, safe and sound, Peter sprawled on the couch watching something impossibly nerdy, while Morgan insisted on braiding his hair into uneven plaits. Pepper would be nearby with a cup of tea, teasing Tony for hovering over them like a mother hen. But if he's learned anything in his life, it's that perfect worlds don't exist. Not for people like him. So when the slightly less perfect but still acceptable version of this world, Friday would have decrypted and salvaged the photo and the file by now, it'd have a lead, a direction, something tangible to cling to. They'd already have Peter and Morgan back, and this nightmare would be over. Instead, it's 2 days later, 5 excruciating days since his kids went missing. And all regrouping at the compound has brought is less and less hope with each passing hour. No one wants to say it. No one dares to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. Something tangible and suffocating. Something none of them are ready to confront. But it's there. In the quiet glances exchanged around the room, in the way no one meets his eyes for more than a second or two. It's in the way Pepper's hands tremble when she grips her mug too tightly, the way May snaps at anyone who so much as breathes too loudly, the way Rhodey's voice softens when he talks to Tony, like he's bracing for him to break. They're all thinking it, feeling it. What if we don't find them? The thought wedges itself into Tony's chest like shrapnel, twisting deeper with every passing second. He can feel the hope slipping away, fraying at the edges, like an unraveling thread, but he refuses to give in to it. He can't. Losing hope means giving in, means throwing in the towel on his kids, and Tony won't do that. He can't do that. He swallows hard, throat tight as he stares at the mess of screens in the corner of the room. Friday's interface flickering as she runs through file after file, trying to piece together something usable. The photo is still up on one of the monitors. Peter's swollen face and Morgan's small, turned-away form burned into his vision like a ghost that won't leave. Tony's hands curl into fists at his sides, his nails biting into his palms. He forces himself to breathe, slow and steady. in and out, even as his mind screams at him to do something. He hears movement behind him, the soft scrape of a chair on the floor, but he doesn't turn around. The family is here, what's left of them anyway, but their presence feels muted, background noise to the chaos in his head. May's voice rings out, loud and cracking with raw emotion. "This isn't enough!" She snaps, pacing the length of the room like a caged animal. Her movements are sharp, frantic, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as though holding herself together physically is the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "We're just sitting here, staring at screens, waiting for someone else to do something. It's been 5 days. "May," Happy says gently, stepping toward her with his hands raised in a placating gesture. "We're doing everything we can." "It's not enough!" she shouts, whirling on him. Her voice trembles, but her anger is sharp, biting. "They're still gone." Happy freezes, his hands falling to his sides. For a moment, his face tightens with something close to hurt, but he masks it quickly, taking a step closer. "I know you're scared," he says softly. "We all are. You don't know." May's voice is a raw scream, echoing off the walls. Her face twists in anguish, her dark eyes burning with tears. "You don't know, Happy. You don't know what it's like to lose people like this over and over and over again." The silence that follows is deafening. Tony feels the weight of her words settling over the room like a suffocating fog, pressing into every corner, every breath. Happy doesn't respond, his jaw tightening as he exhales slowly through his nose. May's chest heaves, her breaths coming in uneven gasps as she wipes at her tear-streaked face with trembling hands. Pepper tries to step in, her voice calm but firm. "May, we're all feeling this." "No, you're not!" May snaps, cutting her off. Her voice breaks, a sob ripping through her chest. "I lost Peter once already during the blip. I lost Ben. I lost my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law. Do you know what I promised them?" She turns, her gaze darting between Tony, Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy, as if daring anyone to respond. "I promised them I'd take care of Peter if anything happened to them. I promised them I'd keep him safe." Her voice shatters, and she presses her hands to her face as a broken sob escapes her. "And now he's gone. And Morgan, she's just a little girl. I can't." Her words dissolve into incoherent sobs, and the room feels like it's holding its collective breath, no one daring to speak or move. Rhodey is the first to break the silence, his tone sharp and laced with exhaustion. "We're all losing it here, May." He snaps, his calm veneer cracking at the edges. "You think we're not tearing ourselves apart every second they're gone? It's not the same," May snarls, her tears giving way to fiery anger. She takes a step towards Rhodey, her finger pointing accusingly. "You haven't lost half of what I've lost." "May, stop!" Happy steps in front of her, his voice louder than usual, more commanding. He grabs her shoulders gently but firmly, trying to ground her. "This isn't helping." May glares at him, her body trembling under his hands. "What will help, Happy?" she demands, her voice rising again. "Tell me, because sitting here isn't doing anything." Tony can't take it anymore. "Enough!" His voice booms through the room, silencing everyone. All eyes turn to him, and he exhales shakily, running a hand over his face as he tries to gather his thoughts. "This isn't helping," he says, his voice quieter now, but no less firm. "Yelling at each other, snapping at each other. It's not going to bring them back." May stares at him, her eyes wide and glistening, her breath hitching in her chest. "What else are we supposed to do?" she asks, her voice cracking. "What else can we do?" Tony looks at her, his chest tightening painfully. He doesn't have an answer, not one that'll satisfy her, not one that will fix this. But he knows what they can't do. "We keep moving forward," he says quietly. "We keep trying. We don't stop until we bring them home." May shakes her head, her shoulders slumping as she sags into Happy's arms. He holds her tightly, murmuring softly to her as she sobs into his chest. Pepper steps closer to Tony, resting a hand on his arm. Her touch is warm, grounding, and he leans into it slightly, his eyes closing briefly. "We'll find them," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. It's more to himself than anyone else, but the words feel like a promise. The room falls into a heavy silence, the tension lingering like smoke. Tony knows they're all breaking, all on the verge of falling apart, but for now, they hold it together. It's the 7th day when something new finally comes. They're all gathered around the dining room table at the compound, a half-hearted attempt at normalcy that no one is buying into. Plates of food sit in front of them, barely touched, the faint clinking of forks and knives scraping against porcelain, the only sound breaking the silence. No one's eating. No one can stomach the thought. But because they're all in the same boat, there's no one to lecture anyone else about it. The uneaten food feels like another weight pressing on the room, a silent reminder of how far gone they all are. Then Friday's voice cuts through the oppressive quiet. "There's an incoming phone call for you, boss. I believe it might be the kidnappers. I'm working on tracing the call, though it is heavily encrypted. If you could keep them on the line for at least a minute or two, I may be able to bypass their protections." The table freezes. Pepper's hand still is mid-air, her fork hovering over her plate. May's head snaps up, her eyes wide and bloodshot. Happy leans back in his chair, his posture stiff, his jaw clenching tightly. A phone call is good. A phone call means that the kids are still alive. It means this is about ransom, about leverage, and the kidnappers finally decided to play their hand. Tony's pulse races, a mix of dread and relief flooding through him. Relief because the call confirms what he's been telling himself over and over again. They're still alive. Dread because he doesn't know what the kidnappers will demand or if they'll be able to meet those demands fast enough to save Peter and Morgan. He glances around the table. Everyone is watching him, their expressions tense and expectant. He knows they're all thinking the same thing. They'd give anything, do anything, to bring the kids home. And Tony knows that for him, there's no limit. He'd give his entire fortune, the company, everything he's built. Hell, he'd give himself if that's what it took. His mind flashes briefly to Peter's bruised face and Morgan's turned away form in the photo, and his chest tightens. "Go ahead and patch them through," Tony says carefully, his voice steadier than he feels. The line clicks, and for a moment there's nothing but static. Then a voice comes through, robotic and distorted, the kind of thing you hear in a bad action movies. "Tony Stark, we have your children." Only it's not silly now. It's terrifying. The tone is unnatural, hollow, devoid of humanity. It sends a chill down Tony's spine, and he can feel the tension in the room ratchet up even further. "You want to open your email," the voice says, mechanical and cold. Friday doesn't wait for instructions, already pulling up the encrypted file they're referring to. A new window appears on the dining room's holographic display, and the email flashing ominously. The voice continues. "The file is set to self-destruct. You have one chance to view it before it's permanently damaged. Watch it, and understand this. If our demands are not met, the children will suffer further consequences." The line cuts off with a sharp click, leaving the room in stunned silence. Tony exhales slowly, his heart pounding in his ears as his mind races. He feels like he's standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss. The next step entirely out of his control. Friday speaks again, her voice calm but urgent. "The file is ready, boss. Displaying now." The room collectively holds its breath as the video begins to play. The video starts with a crackle, the grainy footage snapping into focus like a predator sharpening its claws. Tony doesn't realize he's stopped breathing until he feels Pepper's hands slip into his, trembling and cold. He squeezes it automatically, his own fingers like ice. The room feels too quiet, every sound amplified, the faint hum of the screen, the shuffle of May's feet as she moves closer, the sharp inhale of breath from Happy. No one dares to speak. No one dares to move. And then Peter appears on the screen, standing between the man in a ski mask with a bat and Morgan, his arms stretched out just slightly, like a shield he refuses to lower. Tony's heart lurches. Peter's shoulders are squared, his chin tilted upward with a defiance that Tony knows all too well. It's in his DNA, that Parker stubbornness, a trait he once found endearing but now feels like a curse. The bat presses gently against Peter's jawline, a mockery of care that sends a sickening chill through Tony's spine. He grips the edge of the table so hard he thinks it might splinter. "Peter." May's voice is barely a whisper, choked and trembling. Tony watches, paralyzed, as Peter stares the man down. He's silent, but his body speaks for him. The slight lean forward, the tension in his muscles, the unwavering refusal to let them near Morgan. Tony knows what he's doing, and it makes his chest ache. "Don't hurt her. Hurt me." The bat swings. The crack of impact is deafening, even through the low-quality audio. Peter's head snaps to the side, his legs faltering but not giving out. The camera zooms slightly, capturing the moment his jaw tightens as he forces himself upright again. Tony feels something inside of him break. He's seen Peter get hurt before. Hell, he's seen him come back bloodied and bruised after patrols. But this is different. This isn't Spider-Man taking a hit to protect New York. This is his kid being brutalized, and Tony can't do a damn thing to stop it. Morgan's cries pierce through the chaos, her tinny voice fractured and frantic. She's clinging to the back of Peter's shirt, her little fists knotted in the fabric. Her sobs make Tony's vision blur, and he blinks rapidly to clear it. He doesn't need to look at May to know she's crying too. Her muffled sniffles are all the confirmation he needs. Pepper's grip on his hands tighten as the bat swings again. Peter's jerks violently, a sharp guttural sound escaping him before he straightens once more, his stance unwavering. "God, Pete," Tony mutters under his breath, his voice breaking. He wants to scream, to punch something, to rip the man on the screen apart with his bare hands. But he can't. He can only watch as Peter takes another blow, his body swaying but refusing to fall. Morgan screams his name, her little hands tugging at his shirt, as if she can pull him away from the danger. Tony watches Peter try to look back at her, to reassure her, but the man with the bat strikes again before he can. The taunts from the other captors are muffled noise in the background, their laughter like nails scraping against Tony's brain. He barely registers Rhodey stepping closer, his friend's hand resting heavily on his shoulder. And then it happens. The bat connects with Peter's temple, and his body crumbles like a rag doll. The screen freezes for a split second, the image burned into Tony's retinas. Peter collapsed on the ground, unmoving, his arm limp at his sides. Morgan's sobs echo through the silence that follows, loud and heartbreaking. "No," May breathes, her voice cracking. She takes a step forward, her hands trembling. "No, no, no." Happy catches her before she can collapse, his arms wrapping around her tightly as her legs give out beneath her. Tony can't move. He can't breathe. His mind is screaming, "Get up, kid, get up." But Peter doesn't move. Then the camera shifts. The captors turn their attention to Morgan, her tiny form trembling as she tries to back away from them. She stumbles, her small hands reaching out to steady herself against Peter's body, but he doesn't stir. "No," Pepper whispers, her voice shaking as she presses her hand to her mouth. "Oh my God." One of the men reaches down and yanks Morgan away from Peter's side. She's struggling, kicking and screaming, her voice raw and panicked. The first hit lands on her cheek, a sharp slap that sends her head snapping to the side. Her cries grow louder, more frantic, as the man grabs her face roughly, forcing her to look at him. Another strike comes, this time to her mouth, splitting her lip open. Blood trickles down her chin, staining the pale yellow shirt she's wearing, and Tony feels like he's going to be sick. "Turn it off," May sobs, her voice breaking. "Please, Tony, turn it off." "I can't," Tony chokes out, his voice thick. His eyes are glued to the screen, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurts. "The demands." The video ends, but the screen doesn't go black. Instead, it freezes on an image of Peter and Morgan, battered and bruised. Peter is slumped against the wall, his head tilted unnaturally to the side, unconscious. Morgan sits beside him, her small frame trembling, her tear-streaked face turned downward as though she's trying to disappear. The blood from her split lip glistens under the dim light of the room, a stark, haunting reminder of the violence they've endured. Over the frozen image, a line of text appears, bold and glaring in bright red, like a wound ripped open on the screen. Bring 50 million to the coordinates attached at 5 p.m. Any attempts to wire funds outside of our account or alert authorities will result in consequences. Fail to comply, and the children will suffer further. The words linger on the screen like a ghost, taunting, daring them to act. Pepper's breath catches beside Tony, a sharp, pained sound that cuts through the suffocating silence. May looks like she's about to crumble completely, her face buried in Happy's chest as he holds her tightly, whispering words that Tony can't hear and doubts it will make a difference. Rhodey's hand clamps down on Tony's shoulder, heavy and steady. "We got this," he says, his voice low but determined. "We'll get them back. We've got a new lead now." Tony doesn't answer right away. His eyes are locked on the image, his mind racing through possibilities, strategies, anything to ensure his kids come back alive. The sight of Peter's battered face and Morgan's trembling frame feels like a brand seared into his soul, a reminder of every failure he's ever made. 6 hours from now, he mutters, his voice cold and sharp. We bring them home. It's not a hope. It's not a wish. It's a promise. 6 hours drag on, every tick of the clock an unspoken taunt. The dining room is quiet, except for the occasional scrape of a fork against a plate. Food sits untouched, congealing in the silence-filled, in the tension-filled air. Tony doesn't know why they even bothered. No one can eat, not when every second feels like it's pulling them further away from Peter and Morgan. Pepper sits beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her leg bouncing with barely restrained nervous energy. Across the table, Mace stares at the far wall, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. Happy's hands rest on her shoulders, but she doesn't lean into it, her body rigid and unyielding. Tony tries to focus on the countdown on his watch, the numbers ticking down with infuriating slowness. He should feel relief, knowing that Natasha and her team have everything planned out to the smallest detail. Once the money is handed over and the kids are safe, the operation will move seamlessly into their hands. But relief is a luxury he can't afford. Not yet. Then, the shrill ring of his phone cuts through the oppressive silence. Everyone freezes. Friday's voice comes through the intercoms. "Boss, incoming call from Detective Hartley. Patching through now." Tony strains in his chair, his heart pounding as he grips the edge of the table. "What is it?" Hartley's voice is sharp and urgent. "Stark, you need to get these coordinates. I'm sending them for Friday now." Tony frowns, glancing at the others. Confusion ripples through the room like a wave. The new coordinates flash on a holographic display, only a few miles from the location they were already planning to meet the kidnappers. "Why?" Tony demands. "We're not scheduled to meet them yet. We have Morgan." Hartley interrupts, her voice softening slightly. Pepper gasps, her hands flying to her mouth, tears spilling over her cheeks as she grips the back of her chair for support. "Morgan?" she whispers, her voice cracking. "She's okay," Hartley continues. "Scared, but okay. She wants you, but she's alive, Stark. We've got her." Tony exhales shakily, pressing a hand to his chest as the world shifts beneath him. Relief crashes over him, sharp and overwhelming, but it's immediately followed by a pang of dread. May's voice trembles as she breaks the silence. "Peter?" There's a pause on the line, heavy and suffocating. "We don't have him," Hartley admits. "We don't know where he is." "What the hell do you mean?" Tony's voice rises, his tone sharp with panic. Hartley sighs. "A woman found Morgan and Peter fleeing the warehouse district. She said they came out of nowhere, both of them looking rough. Peter, he told her to take Morgan and hide her. He said to call the police, give them her name, and tell them she had Morgan Stark." "Why didn't he stay with her?" May's voice cracks, her tears spilling. "Why would he leave her?" Hartley's tone drops. "She said he drew them away." The words hang in the air like smoke, suffocating and heavy. Tony clenches his fist, his nails biting into his palms. He can picture it too clearly, Peter bloodied and exhausted, shoving Morgan towards the woman, his voice low but urgent. He knows his son, knows that Peter wouldn't hesitate to put himself in danger if it meant keeping Morgan safe. "Damn it, kid," Tony mutters under his breath, his voice cracking with equal parts pride and anguish. Pepper sits down heavily, her hands trembling as she presses them to her face. "Oh my God," she whispers, her voice breaking. He's out there, alone." May buries her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as Happy pulls her into protective embrace. Tony doesn't have the luxury of breaking down, not now. "Send me the exact coordinates," he says, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "They're on the way," Hartley replies. "We'll be there waiting for you."